Alright, hello again. I'm back here today. I'm going to start adding a little bit more color. I am actually going to kind of show you, it's actually been a few days since I did these first layers. I got busy on some other projects. That's usually the case for me when I'm painting. So when I walked away, my paint dried a little bit on the palette, and so I can just take my razor scraper and get some of that off of there. And this is also a good time to show you that if you walk away from your oil paint for a few days, depending on the temperature, it's kind of cool back here in this room where I'm at. And so your oil paints will actually form a little bit of a crust. And so you can just peel it back and still use the paint underneath. Now, if it's been several days, it might be too dried up to use, in which case you would just want to scrape it up and put some fresh color down. So today I'm going to add some alizarin crimson to the palette. And just to review, I've got alizarin crimson, cad red light, raw sienna, cad yellow medium, lemon yellow, sap green, ultramarine blue, and raw umber, and titanium white. No black. I'm going to do this very vibrant, colorful painting without using any black. So here we go. All right, so looking at this pair, I'm going to start laying in some of the colors that I see, and I'm going to paint from kind of the dark areas to the light areas, and then I also paint from dull to bright. So when you're painting, you never want to use colors straight out of the tube, and that helps you create a more lifelike painting. So what I'll do is I'll kind of dull my colors at first, and that helps me control where I'm going to really make the colors pop out and where I want them to be dull. So I've got a small filbert brush, and actually I'll use one that's a little bit bigger. This one's a little stiff. That's okay. Sometimes I like to paint with a little bit stiffer brush. So I'm going to start with this reddish brown color in the pear. So what I'm going to do is pull some raw umber out here, and I peeled back the crust, and I've still got some good paint to work with here. And so what I see is kind of an orangey red brown color. And so on the color wheel, if I use my cad red light, that is in itself a red orange on the color wheel. So I'm just going to start by these first dull layers. I'm just going to get, all you have to do really is just kind of play with the colors and bump it on the color wheel whichever way you think it's going. So I kind of see some, dull yellow, so I can pull some raw sienna in here. And if I were to just put that on there, okay, it's not too bright, so that's probably a pretty good place to start. But I want to start with my darker areas. So I'm going to revisit the raw umber here and darken this color. Still has a little cad red in it. And I'm just going to block in these areas around the edge of this other pear. Now again, I like to talk about how usually when you're working from photographs, they're not as richly colored as your computer screen, which I highly recommend setting up a computer screen next to your easel if it's, if you're able to do so. You can see a lot more color range in a computer image. But if you are working with a printed out photo, you always want to exaggerate your darks and lights and make it more interesting than the photo. So I'm using a little bit more color here. Probably using a little bit more color than I used in the Alla Prima demonstration. So I'm just scrubbing in a little thin layer, and I've got a little bit of medium in here, still working in my thin layers of paint. really starting to pay attention to the shape of the pear, and I can alter this. There's a little angle here. There's a little, whoops, kind of a bump there. And this is not really a straight edge here. I see a little bump. All right. So in my darker areas of this pear, I also see this color. So I'm just going to kind of pop it in here. Starting to kind of camouflage my pencil layers. Alright, so I do have a lot of red on here right now, but that's okay. I'm working all of these kind of transparent glazed layers. I'm going to build these transparent layers of color up, and there's going to be so much color playing off of each other that the painting will just look really lifelike and vibrant. So now I'm going to start with kind of a dull lime green and a dull yellow. So to make lime green, I use more yellow, mostly yellow, and sap green. And you always want to add a little bit of white to your lime green to bring out the opaque quality of the paint. Yellows, especially lemon yellow, is usually pretty thin. So I've got a green here, and I need to decide, you know, is it the right green? I don't know. It's a lime green, so I'm going to go with it for now. In these first layers, I'm just using dull colors that are close to what I want to get. I'm going to dull this with some raw umber. That would still be quite bright, so I'm going to dull it some more. And I'm just going to start blocking in this color. It's pretty bright, but I'm going to go with it here. Again, in the beginning stages of this painting, it's similar to the Alla Prima method as far as how you apply paint. We're just going to be putting more layers of paint on. So I'm going to wipe my brush and soften. My pear is getting a little bigger here, that's all right. I've seen pears in all different shapes and sizes. I'm actually going to be leaving the stems until later on in the process. So, I've got some reflective light going on. I can actually see some greens in the shadow. It's very subtle. I don't know if you can see it in the film on your screen, but I see some greenish tints in here, and then again I see these reddish tints here in the background. So I've got a very little paint in my brush. This time I'll rinse the green out, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of this color. Notice I come over here on an empty spot on my palette and just kind of thin it out a little bit. So I'm just going to start glazing right around the pear. Now, as I lay this color down, I notice a little bit of a discrepancy in the color value that I see and what I'm putting down. Here I have more of an orange red, but what I see is more of a pinkish red. So I need more of a true red on the color wheel. Right now we're using a red orange, which is our Cad Red Light, and we're going to bump it more towards the red. So I'm going to take this alizarin crimson and mix it with some Cad Red Light, and that's going to give me a very true red. Now this is super vibrant and intense. Very, very intense. So what I'm going to do is dull it and lighten it. This is a very light value here. So I'm going to go to my raw umber, dull this color, lighten it. Now I have more of a pinkish, brownish, reddish color. All right, so what do I do with this? It's wrong. Well, all I have to do is take a little bit of my thinner and loosen it up. And I can wipe it with a paper towel, or this is a little paint eraser. I call it a squeegee tool. And this is that paint eraser squeegee tool that I talked about in the supplies. And so I'm just kind of lifting it off of there. And I'm gonna get some of that thinner off of the surface. And go back to my brush, get that thinner out of there. I don't want too watery paint, so I always want to dab and get that out of there. So now I'm just going to pick up a little bit of this color and start laying it on the surface. Very thin glaze. It's more vibrant here. Actually, it's not vibrant, it's very light value, but it actually gets lighter here. So I'm going to add more white. Turning a little pink on me, but that's all right. I see some pink in there. So now I'm just going to rinse my brush, dab, and soften. I'm just going to kind of pull this out into this area to give it a gradual change. When I was correcting that, I lost some of my pear coloring, so I'll just lay that back in right there. All right, I'm gonna go back to this pear. I see some little bit darker colors here. Now again, I've laid down 3 colors here. And if I brush too much, if I work the paint too much, I'm gonna create mud. So I'm just going to pop in some color and let it hang out there. I'm also paying attention to where I'm going to need to get it lighter later. So I'm purposefully darkening those areas so that I can get more pop later on. And I notice a little bit of dark edging here. Still working in the darks. All right, so now I'm going to go with this dull yellow color. And when I look at that yellow color and I compare it to my yellows that I have to work with, I've got lemon yellow and yellow, kind of a yellow orange, which is the Cad Yellow Medium. Kind of looks like a mixture of both, so I'm just going to maybe mix a little bit together. I've got a little raw umber in my brush. I'm not going to worry about it because I'm going to dull this color anyway with raw umber. I'm going to pick up a little raw umber and dull it. Now it's turning a little bit green on me. So I'm going to add a little bit more Cad Yellow. a lot more actually. Then I'm going to begin to lighten it just briefly. All right, so this is a little bit more dull than what it will eventually end up, but again, I'm putting in dull colors right now. Little pop of yellow right down here. Softening some edges that are kind of getting a little bit sharp. So towards the end, you'll see that I'm really going to sharpen up these edges that are closer to us, and then I will push the edges that are farther away. I'll make them appear farther away by softening those edges. So sharpening brings forward and softening pushes back. This helps your object to look more three-dimensional. I'm going to put a little bit lighter values. I'm going to go ahead and start working those into the pear. So I'm just going to add a little bit of white here. It's turning a little bit, looks kind of pink, but I'm going to go with it here. All right, this is a perfect example to show you how you can use some color theory knowledge. Now, I hope you're enjoying this course. My next course that I'll release to you is, it's all about color theory and really like getting into your mind the thought processes of how you find and mix color. And so here's just a small sample of that course. You know, this is looking a little too pink here. Well, look at the color wheel. So we need it to be, you know, it's pink here. So we need it to be more of a yellow. So we're gonna have to add something in here to get rid of this pink. We're gonna bump it this way on the color wheel. So I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow to it, okay? Yellow and red make orange. So I'm gonna go ahead and not add orange. I'm gonna add yellow to the red to make it a little more orangey. So let's see if my little color theory here is correct. I'm gonna take some yellow, not much, so I'm gonna dye it down over here and then pop it in here. All right, so that kind of killed the pink a little bit. And if I pop it in here, now it appears as a little bit more orange. And I could actually add more cad red and more yellow and get a little more intense red, or orange, I'm sorry, kind of an orangey yellow. Seeing a little bit around this top here, and I'll use that later. I also see a little touch of that color right here underneath the pear. One time I went to a watercolor workshop. Ken Hosmer was his name, and down in Kerrville, Texas, and he talked about bounce light and color. And so, you know, you have light bouncing off this object and reflecting the color on the surface around it. Now, I got too much thinner somewhere in my brush, and so it's basically wiping it away. So I want to get my brush really dry and try to reverse this down here. It's probably too dark. Too orange. Gotta pick up that pink again. Alright, so I'll leave that right now. I can pop that yellow back in there some other time in the process. Alright, so soften these edges. I'm going to work on the shadow in the background a little bit. So I'm going to switch brushes to a little bit more. This is a Filbert, which is flat and also rounded. And just so I can control these edges, I'm going to switch to this little bright. It's a little short, flat bristles, and I can really control some edges. So I'm going to make my so-called black with some raw umber and blue. Now if I were to paint this on a white surface, it looks like black. So that's how you can make a black with blue and brown. You can even intensify the black with alizarin crimson. So I can put a tiny dot of alizarin in there, and then I have black, black. So what I'm going to do is just really darken these shadows right underneath the pear, and also what I'm doing at the same time is sharpening those edges. I'm only going to put it where I see it. So I only see this little shadow, the darkest place right there. I see it right here. And just to show you, I accidentally changed the shape of the pear slightly right there. So I can either keep that in mind and fix it later, or I can squeegee this edge back in there where I need it to be so I don't forget later. You know, you can draw in the paint with one of these. I better get rid of that now. Alright, so I've put this dark shadow in. I've got a few little dark places around my pear here. Really looking at the shape and the contour of the pear right here, it kind of bulges out a little bit more. Maybe got it a little too fat. Again, squeegee. Paint eraser, that's what it's called on the package. It's like a magic tool. Look how sharp I can make the edge with this tool. If that's too sharp, I take a soft dry brush and just barely soften. Alright, speaking of softening, we want to go back here. Just have a clean dry brush, and I'm going to come right back in here and soften the edge of this shadow. Got too much thinner in that brush. You're going to have to pick up one that's drier. There we go. Now I can soften without wiping it off. That's the key. You don't want your brush to be too wet. In your paintings, I see a lot of, I work in a studio with a lot of artists, and there's a lot of students there that take classes. And in paintings that are done by beginners and, you know, even intermediate, mostly beginners, I guess, their paintings they always look so flat to me, and the problem is that there's not a wide range of values. And so creating the full range of values in your painting is going to give you that lifelike depth that you need to kind of give your paintings that wow factor. So I've been leaving this little white space here because it lightens up a little bit. There's some reflective light in there. Whoops, I just wiped off the paint. So before I stop this round of the layering, I'm going to play with the background with some light, and I'm going to play with some cool colors in the shadows. I kind of see some blues in here, kind of a blue-green. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of draw the stems in there with some paint. And then I'll give it some drying time, and I'll meet you back here later. All right, I'm going to go back to my little scrubby filbert here, and I'm going to get some, it looks like blue-green to me. It's very light, but it's kind of dull at the same time. So I see blue-green, so I'm going to add blue and green. Blue, green. I'm going to lighten it up to see the color. It's too green, put some more blue. That's probably good. I'm going to dull it slightly. Again, don't want to use vibrant colors till your final layers. I'm going to lighten it up some more, quite a bit actually. Because I'm going for this very, very light area out in the surface that the pears are sitting in. Whenever I mix paint, when I'm mixing my palette, sometimes I'll use a palette knife to mix, but most of the time I just use a brush, and not my detail brushes, but whenever you mix with your brush, you want to rinse it out before you actually start painting. That helps you control the paint a little bit more. So I'm going to put a little bit of medium in here to loosen it up. Again, I just want to pick up a little bit of it. So I'm going to pick up just a tiny bit and go back to glazing. It's a really neat color right here. It's kind of like a light sea foam. This is glazing right here. And I am exaggerating this color because I like it. And I might as well exaggerate it. I want my painting to be more interesting than the photograph. That's why it's so fun painting. You can basically do whatever you want. If I wanted to add purple to my painting, I could. See, I'm glazing and I can still see my stem. I can still see this shadow. All right, I can intensify this color right on the edge here. Ooh, that's nice. I like that. And just because I can go back and take this darker turquoise. Just because I love this color. And instead of using the duller color, I'm gonna have to mix some more. All right, so that is a jet flying over my house. I live outside of town, but Dyess Air Force Base is nearby. So we hear a lot of jets fly over. All right, so I've got the kind of blue-green going again and a darker value. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of that. Ooh, that's nice. And I'm going to put it right in the darker parts of the shadow. That is Now, back to the Alla Prima method. If I was doing this all in one sitting, if those layers of paint underneath were still wet, I couldn't get this rich color to stay that way as I put it on. So that's why I like this method of glazing. And you know what? Just because I can and I like this color, I'm going to put it in some of the darker parts of this limey green up here. Woo-hoo-hoo. Awesome. That looks cool. A little bit right here. Super. All right. So before I paint the stems on, I'm gonna take a larger filbert, which that one is now stiff. See if I can find another one. So here's a larger filbert, and I'm gonna play with putting some light in here on the ground. So if I lighten the area behind these pears, that's gonna make them pop. I can also put a little bit of light coming right this direction. Clearly the light is coming from here in the picture, and so I'm going to use that, the lighting, the natural lighting that I see, to make my painting more lifelike. So I'm going to take some white over here and thin it with some glaze and just start glazing. Actually, that's too white. So I'm going to go back to my original raw umber mixture. And now that's too dark, so just, you know, keep adjusting here. I want to get rid of this. So what do? I take some thinner. My layers underneath are dry, so I don't have to worry about messing that up, all that work I did before. I can squeegee it. I should be using lint-free towels, but since I'm not wiping that much, I'm not going to worry about it. If you're going to go to town scrubbing on your painting, you want to get some lint-free, those blue paper towels. Okay, so I'm going to pick up this that's kind of an off-white and just kind of come right in here. I don't want to create a halo, so I'll show you in a second. I'm going to block this in, and then I'll show you how to kind of make it fit in with everything. Now that I'm doing this, I realize it's probably smarter to let the pears dry and kind of in danger here of smearing the pear colors into the background. I'll just be careful. So still glazing, glaze, glaze, glaze. Can tone this down here. I can always put more in later, softening these edges. All right, so I've got this lighter color kind of going across here from this side, continuing on off of this side. put some of this color here. A smaller brush would probably work better. All right, so before I stop this round of painting, I'm going to pop in this dark again and put in the stems, and then I'll give it some drying time. And I'm basically just going to draw. I've got a real tiny brush. I'm going to put in some lines here using my dark black mixture. Looking at the shape of the stem. I'm not going to worry about colors right now in the stems. I just want the shape and the edges right. A little more medium helps you kind of create a drawing fluid. Now notice how the stem doesn't start on the edge of the pear. It actually has a little divot right here. There's an edge there, and I'll tone that down later. That's where the stem comes out. All right. So I'm going to add some more of my black. Since I'm using the blue-green, I'm going to put a little bit more blue in there to cool it down more. So that my dark is more of a cool dark. Wipe, soften. I've got too much dark here, so I can pick up some of the light, kind of that seafoam green color, and put this lighter shape back in here. Gonna wipe, soften. There we go.